Uh, hey man,
Yes, Tila?
you can put me down now.
Hey guys, hope everyone had a great weekend out there and wanted to talk about two toy news stories that dropped this past weekend. First one is the rumored casting of Snake Eyes in the upcoming G.I. Joe Snake Eyes movie, G.I. Joe spin-off movie. So it looks like they are looking at a young man named Henry Golding, who is the star of something called Crazy Rich Asians. And nothing's been confirmed, but I've been asked a lot what I think about this possible casting. To be honest, I don't really follow movie news anymore. Haven't for years now, because I just found it was taking away my enjoyment of the movie. Hearing all of the backstage news and rumors, watching the trailers, giving away so many important parts of the movie. So I tend to shy away from this, but just because I've been asked so many times what I think about it, I thought I would share my thoughts on it. So a lot of the old-time Joe fans are voicing some concerns because it's ethnicity swapping, ethnicity changing. Snake Eyes in the comic book was a blonde Caucasian guy. So even though you almost never saw him, his skin, he was always covered up, the fact remained that underneath the mask, the suit, he was a blonde Caucasian guy, which actually really worked well for the character for people out there who don't know much about Snake Eyes, because he's adopted into a Japanese ninja clan and he's the outsider. It doesn't get much more outsider in a Japanese ninja clan than a blonde Caucasian dude. So it really served the character well. The fact that they're changing, if this is true, it might turn out to not be true at all, which is why I say don't really form an opinion, don't really criticize this, don't decide you hate this, because it's not even confirmed. But my attitude towards it isn't a positive or a negative. It's not that I love it, it's not that I hate it. It's somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the gray. And that's a totally cool way to be. You can be undecided about something. You can be in the gray. You can not be passionately for or against something like this. As far as this guy, I haven't seen any of his work, so I can't judge any of his past work. But not that that even matters, because before Solo, a Star Wars story, came out, I had heard that the kid playing the new Solo was good, but I mean, it wasn't relevant to the character of Han Solo. So even if I have seen some of his previous work, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to make a good Snake Eyes. But I do think that if he is great in the movie, this is a lot of ifs, but it's kind of fun to talk about the what ifs and what maybes. If he is great, I don't think his ethnicity will matter at all when it's all said and done. And it's really kind of sad that before we get to know a person, and a lot of Joe fans might not know anything about Henry, it's really kind of sad that before we get to know a person, we judge books by their covers. And one of the most common things that people do, toy movie or not, comic movie or not, it even happens at work, it happens at school, is before we get to know a person, before we even know their name, the easiest shortcut to take is, they are, and whatever their skin color is, whatever their ethnicity is, sometimes whatever their age is or their gender. And that's really lame and weak. So I think if Henry is Snake Eyes and he's fantastic in the role, by the end of it, you won't even think about his ethnicity. And the best example I could come up with to illustrate this point is Denzel Washington in the Equalizer movie. So I know it's a trend in Hollywood to be changing ethnicities for equality, social justice, some people call it. And some of those changes feel very arbitrary and forced. And there just is no good reason for it other than they're following what they found in focus groups or something. I don't know. But in the Equalizer, Denzel Washington is an African American, and in the TV show Equalizer that the movie is based off of, the original Robert McCall is played by Edward Woodward, a Caucasian English guy. So they didn't just change the ethnicity, they changed the nationality too. So you go from an English Caucasian to an African American, and I thought Denzel was incredible. Equalizer was my favorite movie of the year that year, hands down. I've watched it a number of times since it came out, and I absolutely love The Equalizer. And I can tell you in all honesty, I never once have watched it and thought, man, that African American is really great as Robert McCall. McCall, a Scottish name. It just doesn't matter because the performance was so good, the actor was so good. And I never thought about Denzel Washington as his ethnicity anyway. I've mentioned this in a lot of my toy reviews, especially for the Joes, saying the ethnicity never mattered. Stalker is an example I often bring up, and I say when I was a kid, I never thought of Stalker as the African-American Joe. I thought of him as the Ranger. Same with Roadblock. He wasn't the big African-American Joe, he was the heavy machine gunner, just like Rock and Roll. I never thought of him as the Caucasian Joe. I thought of him as the heavy machine gunner. It was more about your duty, your job, your specialty, than your ethnicity, or in the cases of Scarlett and Lady J, your profession, your specialty over your gender too. So I'm hoping that this actor, Henry Golding, is so good that he'll just make you forget what he is. And instead, as we get to know him better, as we get to learn his personality, his charisma, hopefully he has great charisma, that it'll be like The Equalizer was for me with Denzel Washington. I'll look at it and go, that guy was Snake Eyes, not that guy was an Asian Snake Eyes. So I'm open-minded about it. I'm hoping that he got cast not because of his ethnicity, but because of his talent. In a perfect world, they had 9 blonde Caucasian males, and they had Henry Golding, and they had them all audition, and they went, Golding's the best. This guy's the perfect guy to play Snake Eyes. That's what I'd like to imagine happened with the casting. Maybe there's a little bit more. We need to change the ethnicity of this character in order to reach this market over here for, you know, the almighty dollar. That goes back to the business side of movies, which is why these days I'm not as big a fan of movies as I am comics and animation, because animation, it just doesn't seem as though it has all of that focus group data that is forced into it. But for the longtime Joe fans who just feel as though they can't get over that big a change, if they feel like they're being put out to pasture and the source material isn't being treated with reverence, that's fine. I mean, let it go and walk on, move on. The movie is not for you. I'm always saying there's so much more out there for you. It's not the end of the road. You can go back and read the old Marvel comics, or check this out. Thanks again to Tony from Analog Toys for this. It's G.I. Joe Origins, which is actually written by Larry Hama. And there's a blonde Caucasian Snake Eyes in here who gets his face burned off and he dons the mask. So there's lots of comic book stuff, and if you want to go back and watch G.I. Joe Resolute or Renegades, even though they never, I don't believe they ever unmask him or show you a glimpse of him in either of those shows, you can just imagine he is the original blonde Caucasian Snake Eyes in that. But really the magic of the character right from the beginning was that he was completely shrouded, covered, and the fun of it was he could be anyone. So he wasn't restricted to an ethnicity or a nationality other than, you know, USA. So it's kind of makes sense to me. I mean, maybe not with other characters when they swap the ethnicity or they swap the gender. Battlestar Galactica changing Starbuck to a girl, even though Katie Sackhoff did an awesome job, great performance on that show. It wasn't Dirk Benedict's Starbuck. So sometimes when they make that change, it doesn't make sense to me, other than, oh, they are doing a focus group thing or social justice or something like that. But with the character of Snake Eyes, who was always without a face, without a voice. He's kind of a clean slate, and I think it actually might work better with that particular man of mystery than with other characters. And there's also some worry that he's going to be able to talk. Snake Eyes is supposed to be a mute. And I just go back to the comics where even before the accident, he was a man of very few words. So I would love it if he spoke very little, even before the accident. But, you know, in the end, if they do decide to have him be a chatterbox, if they decide to not have him be completely masked, maybe just wearing the visor, kind of like Dawn does in the new IDW comics, that's the new Snake Eyes. That's a reinterpretation, and longtime fans don't have to feel like it's an insult to what they love. Nothing's been taken away from you. You still have your original Snake Eyes figure. You still have your original Snake Eyes comics. If you like the 2 existing Joe movies where he is a Caucasian, you still have your existing Joe movies. Nothing is taken away from you. Nothing is robbed. You know, your joy is only robbed from you if you allow it to be. So I would just remind that nothing is over. Like Rambo said, just go back and re-enjoy your stuff. If you're like me, a couple of years pass and you don't really remember it all that vividly, and you can enjoy it again almost like for the first time again. So I'm really looking forward to reading Origins again, because it's been years since I read this. And regardless of what happens with the Snake Eyes movie, I'm really going to enjoy this again, I bet. And there's also been a rumor about a Chuckles movie, which has a lot of people scratching their heads. There was a comic a few years ago called Last Laugh with Chuckles as the main character. And I'm currently reading that right now and really loving it. And again, maybe I sound overly optimistic, overly hopeful. Thank you, Optimus Prime, for instilling me with such optimism. But I think there's potential for a great Chuckles story. Obviously, there's 100 other Joes I would have picked before Chuckles, but I think it could be a good story. But it's just kind of funny. I just recently did that Grunt figure review, and I posted it on one of the Facebook groups for G.I. Joe. And Kirk Bazigian from Hasbro years ago replied to it, and he said, "This is the guy they should be making a movie about, not Snake Eyes or Chuckles." So I thought that's actually a great idea. I mean, Grunt is the unsung hero of G.I. Joe. He's the infantry guy, the foot soldier. And why not start with Grunt? You certainly can't follow up Snake Eyes with Grunt. That kind of feels like not a step down, but he's not as flashy and exciting a character. I think that a Grunt movie would be fantastic, and maybe they should have started with Grunt. Grunt could have been like the G.I. Joe reboot origin story. And the second big story came out at PowerCon, the big He-Man fan convention, and it looks like there's going to be a new Netflix Masters of the Universe animated show. Animated, yes. I was just saying I prefer animation because you don't have all of the limitations of live action movies. It just feels to me like people put too much stock in the movies. Like the movie is the seal of approval, the brass ring to reach for. It's got to be a great movie. And I just say, don't worry about the movie. The TV shows, the comics can be fantastic. So, new Masters of the Universe Netflix series, which is awesome. And in order to draw in the longtime fans, it's apparently picking up where the Filmation series left off. That's awesome. That definitely gets my attention, because why not continue an old beloved property instead of reboot, reimagining? Give me a refit, not a reboot. And it's also going to have the guys who did the Netflix Castlevania series working on it too. That is a fantastic animated series. If you haven't checked out Castlevania Season 1 and 2 on Netflix yet, and you loved Castlevania, especially Castlevania 3 for NES, you got to check out that show, because it really shows reverence and love for the old Castlevania games. So having them on board gives me a lot of hope, because if they had that kind of love for Castlevania that they poured into the animated series, hopefully they have the same love for the Filmation series and will pour it into the series. There's going to be some kind of mystery about what happened to the sword. I'm assuming He-Man might have gone missing. Looks like maybe Teela will be the main character, so that kind of goes with a lot of things they're bringing back lately. Kind of reminds me of The Force Awakens with Rey searching for Luke, so maybe we'll have Teela searching for Adam, He-Man. The one thing that has me not all that optimistic, so see, I can be a little bit skeptical about things, not excited about everything. Kevin Smith is helming this, and a lot of people are excited about that. They go, yes, Kevin Smith! I don't get excited when I hear like a big established name attached to any property. It's like when the rumor came out that Quentin Tarantino would be doing Star Trek. I didn't go yes. I went, is that a good fit? I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all. Gene Roddenberry was a fairly wholesome guy, or at least he wanted to create a wholesome show. Quentin Tarantino is the farthest thing from wholesome. Kevin Smith, I love his stuff. I don't know if he's the right guy to be doing a He-Man show, though. Who knows? Time will tell. He might do something that really feels as positive, uplifting, inspiring, and wholesome as the He-Man Filmation show was. Who knows? It might be a love letter to that show and Lou Scheimer. But based on Kevin Smith's track record, listening to his podcast sometimes, his interviews, like I said, he's a really funny guy, very talented, very creative. But I think of the example of Lou Scheimer telling the animators, you are under no condition to ever show anything that remotely looks like when She-Ra is on screen, getting a peek, you know, at her as she's, let's say, jumping over the camera or something like that. Lou Scheimer, I never thought of him as a prude. I just thought he was the epitome of class and wholesomeness. And he knew that if you go down a certain road, to borrow a line from Star Wars, forever will it dominate your destiny. He tried to keep things classy, and I don't see Kevin Smith doing that. In fact, I just picture him being on the other end of the spectrum, like, hey, let's get a little peek ski, you know, as She-Ra's jumping over the camera there, and maybe, you know, a little slow motion there. So, you know, you got to get a big name to get the fans all excited, but I'm just doing that whole, is he the right guy for this? So who would be the right guy? There aren't that many Lou Scheimers left in Hollywood, to be honest. The one guy that always comes to mind, though, whenever I think of something really with heart and soul, a positive, pure message, something that isn't really steeped in cynicism and bathos, is Greg Berlanti. He did an amazing show years ago called Everwood, and a lot of the things that he's worked on ever since then just kind of have that wholesomeness to them. He doesn't have a mean streak. He's not mean-spirited. He doesn't troll the audience by killing off beloved characters. He doesn't sacrifice a lot of hard work cultivating a story for a stupid joke. So maybe him, maybe a bunch of other people who haven't hit it big yet, I don't know. So with the Masters of the Universe series, hoping it's good, as with anything, as with the Snake Eyes movie, as with any reboot or reimagining. Hoping it's good, but fine if it's not, because I still have my He-Man episodes on DVD. Still plenty of comics that really retain that essence. There's the She-Ra show, which is perfectly in keeping with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Same animators, same writers, same tone, same positivity. So everything I said about the Snake Eyes movie applies to Masters of the Universe. If it turns out to not be my cup of tea, I'm fine. I'm still a He-Man fan. It doesn't take any of my joy away from my other He-Man stuff that I love. And I just want to also bring up, there's that She-Ra Netflix show, and I think there's something really weird when Masters of the Universe show is announced and people go so is that connected to She-Ra? That should be an absolute slam dunk yes. There's no question. Yes, they are connected, they are related, just like in the old days when He-Man and the Masters of the Universe fed into, launched She-Ra, Princess of Power, morphed into it. They blurred the line a little bit, having He-Man and a couple of the other Eternian characters show up on She-Ra. That's how it should be, but what they're doing now feels more like any modern production. Like, we've got rights issues. Are you allowed to cross over? Are these going to be connected? Is this Adora the twin sister? It shouldn't be, because this new She-Ra show is a reboot, right? It's not the same continuity as before, and they're saying the new Masters show is a direct continuation of the original continuity. They shouldn't be connected, and if they're not, that doesn't make any sense to me that Netflix is going to have a He-Man show and a She-Ra show, and they're not connected. So is the He-Man, the new Masters of the Universe show, going to have the original She-Ra? So you're going to have two different shows with two different She-Ra? It gets really confusing. It just doesn't feel like it has the synergy of the old days. But that's in keeping with most of the new movies and shows that come out these days. They're using brand recognition to try to draw in old fans, and a lot of them are parents, and they're hoping that this warm fuzzy feeling that parents have for these brands, they will pass on to the children and say, hey, this was really special, I want you to enjoy this as well. For those parents who want to pass on what they have learned to their kids, I highly recommend just going and getting those DVDs or streaming on whatever streaming service you have, those old cartoons for your kids. I've talked to so many parents who have introduced their kids to He-Man and She-Ra and Brave Star and Duke and the rest of the Joes and Optimus and the Transformers, and that stuff holds up. It's still good, and dare I say it's better than the stuff today, because it has positivity, it has optimism in it. It has wholesomeness in it. It's not dripping with sarcasm. So, yeah, it's kind of funny that these studios are desperately trying to create new product to draw people back in, and a lot of the time they miss the mark. They don't capture what made the original property so magical, and they don't realize they're sitting on a gold mine. The original stuff is still great. Just make it more available. So those are my thoughts on the Snake Eyes movie and the new Netflix Masters of the Universe show, and I want to know what you think about either of those. So if you have a thought, scroll down and go to town. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmas Day.